Hey, so this is TVZ. I think you're gonna one base if I remember correctly, and do it really badly. So TVZ is tricksy, in that Zergs, if you leave a Zerg alone for a certain amount of time, they're much more capable of punishing you without engaging than any of the other races. But at the same time, they're also much more capable of punishing you by engaging than any of the other races. So playing against Zerg is this sort of balancing act of making sure to keep him busy enough that he doesn't overrun you with economy, while at the same time making sure to turtle heavily enough that he never gets an opportunity to just come kill you. It's really weird. Much different than the other two matchups. And TVZ is actually one of the only matchups in which it is acceptable to leave half your army on defense and use the other half of your army just to be annoying. But it's important to recognize that when you're doing that, it's called harassing. When you're harassing, those units need to not be engaging your opponent's entire army, right? And that's why it tends to be more acceptable in TVZ than the other matchups, is because Zergs tend to be the race that will not have an army even 12 minutes into the game. So then harassing kind of makes sense. You take a third of your units and you throw them up against his nothing, and they're much more likely to do their weight and damage than in the other matchups where you'd be throwing them up against your opponent's entire army. So anyway, at 8 minutes we're looking for 30 workers, and we have them, so you're doing well on workers again. I feel like workers, you have some problems with workers, but you don't have the same kind of large problems that I would be expecting. Usually when I coach people, the first thing I notice is just how few workers are getting, and you're not really having that kind of problem. So again, you're looking for 33 at 9 minutes, and you got 32. So you're doing well on workers. You did cut workers during the engagement, and this is something, like, you'll notice that from about 8 minutes on in every one of your games, you always have at least 400 minerals in the bank. So it never hurts to just queue up 5 SCVs. So when somebody attacks you and you notice their army coming, the first thing you should do is queue up 5 SCVs. When you attack somebody and you know that you're going to be looking at your army, the first thing you should do is queue up 5 SCVs. Because what you don't want is to have a big fight like is going on right now, especially against Zerg. Because Zerg, if they're forced to make an army, they're going to attack you with that army at the end of mopping up your force. So what you don't want to happen is you have a reasonably big force down here. It's going to do some damage, but back home, these buildings, which I have selected, are all idle. And now half of them are idle because you remembered to actually use some of them, but not all of them. Also, your command center is idle. Also, engineering bay is idle. You're not keeping up with depots. So, and this is stuff that will happen in every single engagement that you ever have, and you should expect it. When you fight, you're going to miss stuff. And everybody does, even in Masters League. So you need to prepare. Prepare means prepare. Yeah, anyway, so you need to prepare for that. Especially when you're the one attacking him. You know when the fight's going to be. You want to make sure you have stuff queued up during the fight. So anyway, you did some damage. You're going to kill some workers. You've done double the damage that you've taken at this point, which is great. But eventually when these roaches pop, there's just no chance. Boop, boop, beep, boop, bop, boop, boop. Alright, so during that entire engagement, which went well, by the way, you did a lot of damage. You should have loaded up the medevacs and flown away when all those roaches popped, but whatever. You didn't make any workers. You had 32 when it started, and then 2 minutes later you have 34. So you basically didn't make any workers. You didn't really make a lot of army. Basically, what allowed you not to fall too far behind is the fact that you're almost not mining. And you just drop mules after the fight happened. So again, those are just things you should expect to happen and deal with. So you do load up the medevac and walk away. That's good. So I kind of liked your poke, I kind of liked your engagement, but you got to remember, you won base in order to accomplish that. And in this specific case where you did damage, after the fight, you're ahead, and that's good. But that was a big risk, because if you one base and the poke doesn't do the damage that you need it to do, then suddenly he's on 3 bases with double your income, and you're sitting at home. And that's bad. That's bad, that's bad, that's bad. I like that you're rolling in with depots. You pulled too many guys off your main and put them on your natural. You never want more than 20 guys on a base. Let's see. Okay, 24 is the max. 16 is the soft cap saturation, and 20 is right halfway in between those two things. So typically people will put 16 guys down at their natural and then leave everyone else on their main, and then double rally their CCs back to their main until they have 16 in both places, and then single rally and then whatever. But this is a big deal, because now even though you have tons of workers, more workers than the Zerg by a lot, your income isn't that far ahead of his, because you're basically not mining at your main. Making a 3rd command center, I guess I'm okay with that, but now you're setting yourself up to do this same sort of thing. We're going to leave siege tanks behind and bunkers behind, and then go out and do tiny harassing things, which is it's iffy, because and in TVZ there's a clock. If you don't win by about 18 minutes, you kind of lose, unless you're going for mech, and I can pretty much tell you're not going for mech. So the way Biotank TVZ works is that when he has Broodlords, you lose. And most Zergs will get Broodlords around 18 minutes. I don't know. I don't remember what league you're in. I could totally look it up, but it looks like this guy's not going to get Broods that early. He's getting Ultras. I mean, he's going to have Ultras around 18 or 19 minutes, so here we go. First Ultra is going to be out at 19 minutes. So once he gets tier 3, Ultras with 5 armor are completely immune to your Marines, especially if there's 0-1 Marines. So at this point, I don't think there's any way you can win this game. Just based on composition. If you're still on unupgraded Marines and he gets Ultras, you kind of lose. So he doesn't have Ultra armor yet. He's getting it. I don't know that he's getting... He's getting 2-2. Ground ups. Crushed your army. And now you're going over and taking your 3rd. Yeah, you're just completely dead at this point. Okay. So late game TVZ, valid compositions are Raven Battlecruiser, Marine Tank with Vikings, and just Mass Thor. Those are like the viable compositions, and you can mix Thors with Ravens and Battlecruisers, and you can mix Marine Tank Viking with some Battlecruisers as well. But in general, you want to pick an upgrade path and stick to it, because you can't afford to be getting all 3 separate upgrade paths. So for example, if you don't upgrade air, making a battlecruiser is a waste of time, because it'll just die to anything. And if you don't upgrade infantry, making infantry is a massive waste of time, because it'll just get ripped to shreds by all this stuff. And if you don't upgrade mech can still actually be pretty decent. So if you're not going to upgrade, I would recommend mech. So it's weird that you get 2 engineering bays and then you don't use them. It's obviously a mistake, but you should add your engineering bays to your same hotkey with your command center, so that every time you make SCVs, you're seeing whether or not your upgrades are currently building, and then just try to really keep up on upgrades, because upgrades are really crucial in TVZ. Just because armor helps against fast attacks more than against slow attacks, and attack helps somebody who attacks quickly more than somebody who attacks slowly. So if you're making Marines, then armor is awesome against you, and if your opponent is making Lings, then attack is awesome for him. So Zergs just have every incentive to get lots of upgrades, and in contrast, Marines have every incentive to get lots of upgrades as well. So a bunch of Ultras with the Ultra upgrade thing. Now they have 5 armor. They're basically immune to these Marines. The Marines are doing 3 damage instead of 8. I've said a bunch of times the counter to Ultras is buildings, and this is just another demonstration. He's being really stupid with his Ultras. It's kind of, but I think he's doing it. The thing is, he hasn't taken his fourth. Your opponent is so bad that it's almost not worth watching. Until you're in Diamond or Masters, you really want to be comparing yourself to yourself rather than comparing yourself to your opponents, because they're all going to be bad. And if you do the theoretically perfect build or production or whatever, you're just going to win by default, almost no matter what you do. So, like, looking at this game at 25 minutes in and saying, well, okay, the situation is that you have a bigger income than him, you have 78 workers, you have a smaller army than him, you have a much, much worse tech maturity than him, and you're going for a composition that doesn't seem to be viable against his composition, but he's also mining out. He's also completely lost his main. His worker saturation balance is terrible, and so you're kind of ahead in this game. And his composition is just completely nonsensical. He's making Hydras. Roach, Hydra, Infester, 1 Muta with some Ultras when he can afford it. So, like, even though you're in a theoretically terrible position, he's in an even more theoretically terrible position. So you might win just because he's that bad. So your whole army melts. But again, you made the same mistake as you've made in all of these games. That wasn't your whole army. It looks like your whole army melts because he's got so much more army than you. But if you look, before the fight, you actually have a bigger army than him. So why does it look like your army is tiny compared to his? Because you took a tiny chunk of your army and attacked him with it, leaving the rest of your army back home to do nothing. And I don't know. Like, that makes sense if you're going to take your army and try to snipe his main and retreat without losing anything. But if you're just going to walk up and attack him frontally, you just can't do that. You can't do that in any matchup. It's just so wrong. So what you would want to do if you were going to leave half your troops behind and use the other half of your troops to try to do damage is hide them somewhere like here and then wait until his army is visible somewhere really far away. Like if you saw his army over here checking for your fourth, then you would take your army that's already close to his base, dart in, kill these upgrades, and retreat. But if his army engages your third of an army, you're just going to lose it without doing any damage, and that's really bad. So this happens to you over and over. Don't do that. Don't split your army up. You want your whole army to always be in a giant ball. Every single unit you have should always be together in all matchups at all times for all reasons. So again, 1 Thor against his whole army. The Thor kills nothing. Why would you take 1 Thor and fight his army with it? And then a third of your army defending against his whole army. That's going to be bad. And then half your army fighting against nothing. So this is kind of a base race, except that if he hadn't attacked you with his army, then it wouldn't be a base race. It's only a base race because he chose to go attack you at the same time as you took a third of your army and walked off and attacked him. And this would be a much better base race if this was 100% of your troops too, because then he couldn't just come home and kill it. He would come home and fight it and maybe lose. Or stay in your base and actually base race with you. So again, he comes home with his whole army, kills your whole army, and you killed 1 base of his. You're not mining, he's not mining. This game is getting a little ridiculous, so we'll just go back and talk about that first push. 10 minutes. Again, we saw from the audio build thing that 108 supply at 10 minutes is what you're shooting for. You've got 66, nowhere near 108. So clearly that the build you did just wasn't very good. And there's no excuse for not having a good build, because you can just cheat and use someone else's. Just find an audio build that you like and cheat and use it, and you'll have a perfect build. And then just throughout the rest of the game, upgrades became a big problem. And compositionally, I don't know that I like Marine Tank in TVZ anymore. Marine Tank was standard for a long time when Ling Muta Baneling was standard, because Marine Tank is awesome against Ling Muta Baneling. But now that Ling Muta Baneling is extinct, why do you keep doing the counter to something that he's obviously not going to do? That just doesn't make any sense. So let's see if Audio Builds has a good TVZ build for you.
Hey guys.
Terran Audio Builds. Reactor Hellion Double Expo. I think that's a... Yeah, I think this is a TVZ build. This is also a TVZ build. This is also a silly TVZ build. And this is a TVZ build. Anyway, pick one, I don't care which one, and try it out. And try it out against nobody. Don't use it on the ladder. Try it against no one. Make sure that you can hit the benchmarks. Like, compare what you have at 10 minutes to what the pro had at 10 minutes. And if you can, take it to the ladder, and you should just kind of win by default. If you execute an audio build perfectly in any matchup and then just A-move with it, you should have so much more army than your opponent. It should just be ridiculous. So, I mean, you saw how much damage this push that you made did. Like, this did a ton of damage. Imagine if instead of 34 army supply, though, that if this was 56 army supply, almost twice. Yeah, like 60% more army would have made a huge difference. Ta-da!